Due to the nature of my chosen topic, I would like to make you acutely aware that there may be content that viewers may find upsetting in relation to violence, ableism, graphic depictions of physical or mental health conditions, as well as horror content.
From our sponsor.
Hey kids! For the wildest, wackiest, spookiest adventure ever! It's the sound of fear, a totally awesome journey through the coolest, creepiest sounds in horror. So grab your popcorn. Ever wonder why some sounds give you goosebumps? We'll explain it all. It's like science class, but what is horror uses monsters to make you go yikes class, but what is class? Horror even cooler. It's the future of spooky, and it's totally awesome. Listening and keep being brave. Next time, tell your the sound. Every whisper could be a scream.
Within the landscapes of horror cinema, disability often serves as a nuanced element utilised to evoke visceral responses and provoke deeper reflections on societal fears. This video essay delves into the intricate interplay among screen media, disability representation, and the uncanny within the realm of analog horror, with a particular emphasis on its auditory dimensions through an analysis of prominent media platforms and creative methodologies. Drawing on seminal theories such as the Uncanny Valley, insights from disability studies, and perspectives from musicology, I explore how soundscapes and musical compositions intersect with the portrayal of disabled bodies to elicit fear and discomfort in analog horror. Imagine encountering something familiar, but in the context that is eerie, taboo, or outright frightening. This dissonance is the essence of the uncanny Sigmund Freud delves into in his concept with his exploration of the uncanny, or das Unheimliche, in German, which literally translates to unhomely. To its inhabitants, a home is a place of safety and comfort, yet it conceals private lives and secrets, tucked away from the outside world. Das Unheimliche, then, represents a reversal of this notion. It turns the familiar inside out, making it strange by uncovering repressed secrets or by casting doubt on what was once certain. If we extend the metaphor of the home, the uncanny might reveal hidden events from the past, repressed desires, or aspects of one's character that have been long buried. These revelations disrupt the presumed safety of the home, making what was once comforting now unsettling. Freud's ideas resonate with Julia Kristeva's concept of objection, where we experience a visceral reaction to something that has been forcibly expelled from the symbolic order. In 1946, Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, in their work Dialectic of Enlightenment, explore the concept of the uncanny and expressed growing concern about what they viewed as a widespread suppression of free thought. Drawing extensively on the ideas of Freud and Marx, they argued that the United States, under the pretense of freedom, had become alarmingly similar to Nazi Germany in its control over public consciousness. Adorno, in particular, suggested that conceptual thought inherently excludes the other. They believed together that mass media and public relations had created a culture of manufactured needs and desires, which reinforced existing power structures. For example, the invention of the radio turned people into passive listeners, bombarded with identical content across various stations. This homogenization of media was part of a larger cycle of manipulation and retroactive need, which further tightened the system's control over society. The concept of the uncanny plays a role here by revealing how even the most familiar and seemingly harmless elements can become tools of control and manipulation, making the ordinary appear strange and unsettling. The concept of the uncanny is further explored in modern phenomenon known as the Uncanny Valley, introduced by Mori in 1970. The idea refers to the unsettling feeling people experience when they encounter entities that closely resemble humans but are subtly off in some way. These almost human figures provoke discomfort because they blur the line between the familiar and unfamiliar. An example of this can be seen in the portrayal of human characters in video games from the mid-1990s to the mid-2010s, where characters often appeared unnervingly plastic, with unrealistic movements and awkward in their vocal synchronization. This concept also bears relevance to how disability is represented, as Mori's original graph offers valuable insights into this connection. I've highlighted the language and dichotomies that Mori's graph suggests, where figures like zombies and corpses are positioned as the antithesis of a healthy person and therefore uncanny. Similarly, an ill person or prosthetic hand occupies this same realm of uncanniness evoking the discomfort associated with something that should be familiar, like a human body, but is altered or incomplete. This is also where we encounter the myoelectric hand, a prosthetic with integrated robotics that mimic natural finger movement. While designed to restore function and familiarity, it can also paradoxically provoke an uncanny reaction, as it teeters on the edge between the human and the artificial. Each of Mori's examples have a place within ableist depictions in modern media. An example would be zombies and disability, in relation to which McDaniel states, "Contemporary zombie culture appears to participate regularly in the horror genre's tradition of reinforcing a cultural association between disability and deviance. This occurring across media forms such as game and film, internationally, and with a historic continuity from early film until now." In each of these examples, sonically, we hear semiotics such as groaning, screaming, and generally sounds we associate with pain and therefore ill health. A different example of Mori's uncanniness is afforded by prosthetic hands coincided with the problem of futuristic sci-fi and disability. This materializes in the idea of the supercrip proposed by Mary Johnson in 1989. This is someone who overcomes their disability, or the upgrade my body trope shown in both DC Comics' Victor Stone, or Cyborg, and Darth Vader's character, who are both shown as powerful with their cybernetic suits, and yet powerless without them. As well as this, there is the autistic robot trope shown through characters such as Data from Star Trek, depicted as robots but are given the characteristics that share traits with neurodiverse behaviours in media. Sonically, we hear sounds such as deep breathing, famously made by Darth Vader because his suit is breathing for him. The transformation of Victor Stone into Cyborg is achieved via the sounds of pain and accident.
You should probably move. Victor Stone, aka Cyborg. He's a college athlete, a quarterback for Gotham City.
He was in an accident and was severely injured. To save his life, his father merged his body with advanced alien technology. Half man, half machine, but he's all superhero.
And characters such as Data speak with monotone and robotically timed speech, as well as the absence of sounds such as breathing, sneezing, and coughing.
One is my name. The other is not. Fond farewell.
By examining instances where sounds either deviate from norms or are deliberately absent, I explore how such deviations contribute to the perception of disability as wrong or disturbing. Each of these sonically coded representations of disability tropes have foundations in the medical model of disability. The medical model, which views disability as an individual's defect focusing on curing or managing illness or disability. Using Mori's model, I will scrutinize the manipulation of sound conventions in horror media, critiquing their portrayal of disability and the sonic codification within horror narratives, as well as its reliance on ableism.
Hello, I'm the door salesman. I sell things at the door. What's in my bag? I don't know. Let's explore.
It could be anything in there. Anyone you can see, even if what's inside could kill you and me.
Analog horror epitomizes a compelling fusion of vintage aesthetics and modern editing techniques, resulting in a disorientating immersive viewer experience. Despite its nomenclature, analog horror meticulously recreates analog visuals using contemporary digital tools, evoking a profound sense of nostalgia for a bygone era while simultaneously underscoring the inherent impossibility of authentically replicating the past in the present context. This genre has achieved considerable popularity across various platforms, as exemplified by phenomena such as Five Nights at Freddy's, Slender Man, and the broader found footage subgenre. The genre's historical roots can be traced back to 1938 radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds, highlighting its long-standing engagement with themes of media-induced anxiety. Though not originally intended as a deliberate commentary, analog horror critically examines the harmful effect of media consumption, including the dangers of accessing forbidden content and the psychological toll of disturbing visuals. This often inadvertently evokes imagery and experiences related to disability, raising questions about who is excluded or exploited for scares. The genre's use of found footage is especially significant, providing a unique form of immersive storytelling that relies minimally on traditional scripting and focuses on raw, unfiltered experiences while also reinforcing the homogenization of normative perspectives. As stated before, what makes a series analog horror is the fact that it isn't analog, it's a digital recreation. The genre simply can't be done without editing because it is supposed to feel like a hollow, uncanny copy of something we know and are familiar with. Editors use a number of different programs like Audacity, Blender, Sony Vegas, Adobe Photoshop, Final Cut Pro and more. Because every component of the video is edited, it makes it hard to create a list of exactly everything that goes into the editing process, but it can be narrowed down to a few main elements. Uncanny distorted imagery, choppy out-of-order editing, distorted sound design, and video and image filters. Again, subtlety is key in analog horror sound design. Slight glitches in audio and video feeds, if executed with finesse, can significantly enhance the horror experience, creating an eerie ambience without overwhelming the audience. These auditory nuances function as a form of ambient noise, evoking a hollow, reflective sensation that feels like a distant, ungraspable memory. The human voice, though recognizable, often carries an uncanny quality, sounding almost but not quite human. A diverse range of musical genres is employed to evoke both familiarity and unease, from classical compositions to big band music of the 1920s through to the 1950s, and nostalgic training tapes or mole music from the 1980s and 1990s. Occasionally, diegetic sound effects such as noise of characters running through woods or fidgeting with a camera are incorporated to enhance realism. Additionally, the music is frequently altered with effects like echo, audio disruption, reminiscent of a tape stuck in a machine, and variations in speed, pitch, or sound modulation, all contributing to the unsettling atmosphere intrinsic to analog horror. Analog horror heavily relies on the concept of false nostalgia, where nostalgia acts as an anchor for our identity, helping people cope with difficult times when their current reality feels unstable or threatened by change. In analog horror, this mental refuge of escapism is gradually eroded as the story unfolds, leading to a darker, more unsettling experience that makes the horror feel disturbingly real. The genre plays on fear of corrupted innocence, insecurity, manipulating a person's nostalgia and turning it against them. This idea also ties into received nostalgia, where people feel nostalgic for times or experiences they never actually lived through. Media, particularly films like Grease or Dirty Dancing, often invoke this sense of longing for an idealized version of small-town America, a constructed image of perfection. However, as in the case of The Truman Show, this idealized perfection is ultimately revealed to be a mere construction. Nicholas Royal posits that the entire film industry might be defined as a palliative working to repress the uncanniness of film. Unlike other genres that may use music to reinforce narrative cohesion or evoke specific emotions, horror films often invert these conventions, using sound design to highlight the uncanny and create discomfort. Horror film composers deliberately employed specific musical techniques to evoke fear, such as avoiding memorable melodies in favor of atonal textures, destabilizing pitch or harmony, and unsettling techniques like glissandi, tremolos, and tone clusters. These strategies are designed to disturb rather than comfort, creating a sense of unease that is central to the horror experience. For example, in Psycho, the use of disembodied music, sounds that characters in the film do not hear, but that inform the audience of impending danger, contribute to the film's eerie atmosphere. The separation of sound from its source blurs the line between illusion and reality, enhancing the unsettling nature of the film. In horror, this disconnection between sound and source, such as the inclusion of non-diegetic sounds that do not have an immediate source within the film's world, is used to deepen the audience's sense of unease and tension. Luigi Pirandello's observation that the voice is of a living body which produces it, whereas on film there are no bodies or actors, as on stage, but merely their images photographed in motion, highlights the uncanny nature of film sound, where the familiar becomes strange and the boundaries between reality and illusion are blurred. The physiological impact of music in horror films is significant. Studies have shown that participants exposed to musical conditions exhibit higher skin conductance levels, indicating increased arousal compared to those in non-musical conditions. This heightened state of arousal is often achieved through sudden stinger chords and shock effects. This links the timing of auditory cues with the psychological impact on viewers, illustrating a direct connection between sound design and emotional responses. Tanya Kavinska notes that horror films derive much of their power from the viewer's inability to intervene, even when they cannot anticipate events through sound cues. This, inevitably combined with auditory manipulation, contributes to the horror film's ability to maintain a continuous state of tension and fear. Mad God is a stop-motion live-action hybrid horror film created by Phil Tipett, a legendary figure in the world of visual effects, known for his work on iconic films like Jurassic Park and Star Wars.
Some of the guys at the studio were inspired by like the Star Wars movies and RoboCop and all that kind of stuff. You know, really wanted to build things and be involved with that kind of filmmaking, but they missed the boat.
Over 30 years in the making, Mad God is a culmination of Tipett's career, a nightmarish vision that pushes the boundaries of conventional storytelling and visual aesthetic. Although Mad God does not strictly conform to the conventional characteristics of analog horror, such as VHS aesthetics, broadcast anomalies, or pseudo-documentary styles, it exhibits numerous thematic and stylistic parallels. The film's reliance on older techniques such as stop-motion animation in conjunction with its pervasive atmosphere of dread and surrealism aligns it conceptually with analog horror, even if it does not strictly adhere to its conventional definition. Phil Tippett's visual style in Mad God is profoundly influenced by stop-motion pioneers such as Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien. Harryhausen's work on The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and O'Brien's creation of King Kong set the foundation for Tippett's exploration of the grotesque. In Mad God, Tippett uses stop-motion animation to bring to life a world that is both haunting and surreal. The creatures that inhabit this world, often naked, disfigured, and monstrous, are a direct nod to the techniques and themes of these early masters, but with a distinctly modern twist. The film's monochromatic palette and the pervasive use of industrial settings amplify the sense of decay and despair. Most scenes are drenched in shadow, allowing the viewer to focus on the disturbing details of the environment without being overwhelmed by colour. These settings are not just backdrops, but integral to the narratives, representing a world consumed by sin and devoid of hope. But Mad God is, by design, meant to invite the viewer to find their own dots to connect and extract their own meaning from the piece. Traditional musical devices could only inhibit that participation, so I steered away from ideas that leverage those formulas overtly. Will explains that Mad God is crafted to invite viewers into an open-ended experience, encouraging them to connect their own dots and derive personal meaning from the film. To achieve this, Wool avoided traditional musical cues, opting instead for a soundscape that would not dictate emotions but rather amplify the unsettling atmosphere of the film. By eschewing familiar musical patterns, Wool allows the film's auditory landscape to dominate by sounds like creaking, groaning, and the tension of distant screams, to become a central component of its eerie world. The absence of traditional score forces the audience to engage more deeply with the ambient noises that fill the void, enhancing the sense of discomfort and unease. In Mad God, it's not the music that guides the viewer's emotions, but the raw, often disturbing sound that emerges from the film's decaying and grotesque environment. The film opens with the ominous rumblings of a world on the brink of destruction, accompanied by a passage from Leviticus chapter 26 verses 27 to 30, which promises divine retribution for sin. I will devastate the land, so that your enemies who come to settle in it shall be appalled. As this warning reverberates, the sound design takes centre stage. Throughout Mad God, the creatures that populate the film are brought to life not just through their grotesque visuals but the unsettling noises they produce. These auditory elements, more than any musical score, evoke the primal horror that defines the film. The creatures, naked in their monstrosity, commit acts of violence that are rendered even more horrific by the visceral sound design, making every stomp, crush, and scream resonate with the weight of their surroundings. The sound design in Mad God not only complements the film's grotesque visuals, but also deepens the viewer's immersion into a world where horror is omnipresent and inescapable. This choice resonates with disability scholarship, particularly the work of Hughes, who critiques the ableist tendencies to associate pain with suffering with an ontological deficit, or a diminished state of human subjectivity. In Mad God, the grotesque soundscape subvert conventional notions of the natural order by emphasizing the chaotic, unnatural elements that exist outside societal norms. Hughes argues that modern society often marginalizes those who deviate from an idealized form rooted in the dichotomy between Leb, the living body, and Corpor, the dead body. The distinction often leads to the devaluation of certain lives, categorizing them as less valuable or even monstrous. The sound design in Mad God mirrors this critique, as the film's auditory environment is dominated by the sounds of bodies that are suffering, deformed, and in a state of perpetual agony. These sounds challenge the viewer to confront the uncomfortable reality of lives that exist outside of the standardized norms, lives that are often relegated to the realm of the unnatural and therefore feared and marginalized. The dehumanization of the malformed and grotesque creatures in Mad God resonate deeply with Adorno's critique of societal norms and the exclusion of the other. In the film, these creatures are further stripped of their humanity through the unsettling sound they emit, reinforcing their status as belonging outside the natural order. However, By centering these sounds, Mad God challenges the audience to reconsider the value of humanity of these unnatural beings, forcing a confrontation with the ableist valuations that dictate what is considered normal or acceptable in society. The relentless consumption in Mad God is not limited to resources of labour, but extends to the very essence of being. The acts of consumption become an act of the original sin, a process by which human experience is stripped down to its most base, mechanical components. The factory workers in the film, who neither eat nor live in any meaningful sense, are symbols of this reduction. Their innocence, if it can be called that, lies in their complete subjugation to the will of their overseers, a state of existence where they are merely extensions of the machinery, devoid of personal agency or moral culpability. This dehumanization is further emphasized in grotesque medical scenes, where the assassin is brutally eviscerated by a doctor and nurse. These figures, far from healers, are agents of further dehumanization, reducing the assassin to a collection of organs and genetic memories to be probed and harvested, their suffering dismissed as mere noise, mirroring how society often disregards the voices of those who are differently abled. The cold, clinical extraction of the assassin's memories represents the ultimate violation of the natural order. Here, the biological blight of Mad God reaches its peak, where even the most personal and intimate aspects of existence, one's memories, one's very being, are not spared from the machinery of consumption. The sound design plays a crucial role in conveying this sense of dehumanization and horror. The incessant screams, screeches and groans of the creatures in Mad God are not just expressions of pain, but are indicative of their reduced state. Beings that exist in a constant state of suffering, stripped of their humanity and reduced to mere noise. These sounds are a stark contrast to the silence of the assassin and the clinical detachment of a doctor and nurse, highlighting the divide between those who control the machinery and those who are consumed by it. In this bleak dystopian vision, Mad God offers a commentary on the dangers of ableism and the devaluation of human life in the relentless pursuit of the norm. One of Freud's chief locations for the uncanny is the concept of the doppelganger, or the double, which relates to notions of the self, repetition, and the merging of self with the other. This merging often involves a substitution of an insecure self, unsure of its true self, with a double that embodies what is hidden or oppressed. In cinema, the uncanny often emerges when the medium creates doubles of everything to capture a scene, challenging the audience's perception of reality. The uncanny is described as residing in liminal space, where something is neither entirely animate or entirely inanimate. The categorical contradiction evokes a deep sense of unease, because it disrupts our understanding of the world. In Mad God, this is vividly illustrated through the portrayal of the monstrous figures that straddle the boundaries of what we recognize as human. These creatures, like human insect hybrids or waxy animated figures, embody the uncanny by violating the clear-cut categories we rely on to make sense of reality. Dehumanized individuals often occupy an uncanny space in the minds of dehumanizers, as they blur the line between what is considered human and subhuman. Mary Douglas' in Purity and Danger explores how societies establish order by categorizing and rejecting what they perceive as anomalies or out of place. Dirt, in her view, is not an isolated phenomenon, but a byproduct of a systemic ordering that extends to our understanding of the natural world. The labelling of botanical flowers as desirable and weeds as undesirable, or animals as pets versus vermin, reflects the broader societal tendency to create rigid categories that reinforce power structures. The film, Mad God, like Douglas's analysis, exposes the dangers of such categorization and the devastating impact it has on those deemed unnatural or abnormal. This dynamic is also reflected in how society perceives sound and music. As highlighted by improvisational sound singer Joanne Haytu, her practice of sound singing, which involves an unconventional use of vocal techniques to create music, often elicits discomfort precisely because it deviates from the norms of what is considered acceptable sound. The discomfort with Haytu's vocal sounds can be seen as a reflection of the broader societal tendency to reject what does not fit neatly within established categories, whether it be sounds, people, or behaviours. In an interview, Haytu reflects on this phenomenon, stating, "I don't know why, with samplers, electric guitars, with a lot of instruments you can do heavy sounds, but with voice, people turn away. With the turntable, does the same thing, it sounds nice to them, but when I make it they ask, why are you doing this kind of sound with your voice?" Her observation speaks to the broader issue of how certain forms of expression are marginalized because they challenge the boundaries of what is considered acceptable art. The Pythagoreans' exploration of musical harmony through arithmetic, geometric, and harmonic means offers a fascinating contrast to contemporary notions of normality and standardization. For the Pythagoreans, these mathematical means were instrumental in understanding harmony and balance in music, aiming to reveal the universe's order through numerical relationships. They used these concepts to describe musical scales and proportions, but did not apply them to define normality as we understand it today. The concept of the golden mean or golden ratio and its association with music of the spheres provides a profound historical context for understanding harmony and proportion. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, was central to the Pythagorean thought, representing an ideal proportion linked to beauty and balance in both music and nature. This idea influenced Renaissance thinkers such as Johannes Kepler, who proposed that the cosmos could be understood through musical harmony, suggesting that the distance between celestial bodies and their movements could be expressed in numerical ratios akin to musical intervals. Kepler viewed the universe as a grand symphony governed by harmonious proportions, reflecting the Pythagorean belief in cosmic order derived from numerical relationships. This contrasts with contemporary approaches to normality, which often rely on statistical averages and deviations. In modern contexts, the arithmetic mean has become crucial for summarizing data and defining what is normal across various fields such as statistics, medicine, and social sciences. It is used to establish averages like heart rates or cognitive abilities and set standards against which deviations are measured. This can lead to labeling those outside of the normal range as abnormal or defective, a significant shift from the Pythagorean focus on harmony and balance. The conflation of the mean with average or normal has profound implications. For instance, the body mass index and IQ scores are often used to define normalcy, with scores near the mean considered standard and those far from it viewed as outliers. Such statistical assumptions and conceptual frameworks create a rigid norm, where those outside of this range are often categorized as abnormal. The shift from viewing differences as part of a harmonious system to treating them as deviations can contribute to stigmatization and exclusion of individuals with disabilities. Resonating with Michel Foucault's idea of the relativity of definitions, such as madness, shaped by cultural and historical contexts rather than linear progressions. For instance, the medicalization of conditions like hysteria during the Enlightenment reflects a broader trend where societal norms, often constructed by a dominant group, impose rigid categories that marginalize those who deviate from the standard. In this case, that was women. This process of medicalization and categorization, where disability and illness are distinct but often conflated, demonstrates how norms are defined and enforced, evolving through time and cultural shifts. The Walten Files incorporates many of the defining elements of analog horror, such as use of retroaesthetics, unsettling imagery, and eerie sound design, as well as a fragmented narrative that slowly reveals a disturbing and horrific backstory. The series draws heavily on the themes of the uncanny and surreal horror common in analog horror by juxtaposing seemingly innocent or mundane settings like an old children's entertainment company with dark undertones. In essence, the Walten Files embodies quintessential analog horror. The Walten Files, created by Chilean artist and animator Martin Walls, is a haunting animated series set in the small fictional city of Brighton, Michigan, during the years 1974 to 1982. This series is presented as a found footage, but rather than traditional live action, it utilizes animation to evoke its eerie atmosphere. All's intention was to craft a narrative that felt like a fever dream, blending unsettling visuals with a cryptic story. Inspired by the atmosphere and themes of Five Nights at Freddy's, the Walten Files delves into the dark secrets of Bunny Smiles and the unsettling events captured on the company training videos, pieces of licensed media, and footage recorded directly by employees. As the tapes unravel, they expose the unsettling events that led to the company's downfall, drawing viewers into a world where mechanical beings and twisted realities converge. The series echoes the themes of Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, where the protagonist Grigor Samsa undergoes a grotesque transformation into an insect. This metamorphosis symbolizes the violation of human boundaries, challenging Grigor's self-perception and his acceptance in society. Similarly, the animatronics in the Walten Files embody a distorted reality, where the line between human and non-human blurs into the grotesque, creating a sense of unease and horror. The series also delves into Cartesian dualism, the philosophical concept that the mind and body are distinct entities. The animatronics in the Walten Files reflect a mechanized body that disrupts traditional notions of identity and humanity. Descartes' philosophy suggested that the mind could persist even as the physical body deteriorates, a concept that is hauntingly literalized in the series' portrayal of these twisted beings. The animatronics' mechanical bodies, combined with their lifelike qualities, create a disturbing contrast that challenge the viewer's understanding of what it means to be human. This is reminiscent of Kafka's Metamorphosis or Cronenberg's The Fly, where the transformation of human into insect produces a visceral reaction because it defies our expectations of what is natural or normal. Grigor's body becomes or inhuman, unwell, disadvantaged. Not only in his situation alien, but his body itself also becomes alien to him. Movements and actions that were once part of his daily routine can no longer be performed in the same way. This sudden alienation from one's own body is a common experience for people with disabilities, particularly those who develop sudden disabilities. Whether through accident, illness, or another cause, those who find themselves suddenly disabled may not literally wake up in a new body like Grigor, but they nonetheless experience a body with undeniably different abilities that it had had previously. However, it is important to note that while Grigor can no longer do many of the things he once could in his own body, he gains new abilities. Similarly, Many who suddenly find themselves disabled are forced to interact with their bodies in ways that had not previously considered. Initial acceptance may fade when it becomes clear that they will not suddenly recover or regain their previous abilities. This experience mirrors that of many disabled people who attempt to hide themselves or their disabilities for the comforts of others. This process of quasi-acceptance turning to disgust is another stage that many people who find themselves suddenly disabled go through. The Walten Files features animatronics that, while outwardly robotic, produce sounds that evoke human emotions and distress. In the episode Bunny Farm, the haunting rendition of Daisy Bell by a computer adds to the sense of unease. This song, written in 1892, gained notoriety in 1961 when the IBM 7094 computer at Bell Labs sang it, marking an early demonstration of computer speech synthesis.
Daisy, Daisy, it's your answer. I'm crazy, all for the love of you.
The same song was famously used in 2001: A Space Odyssey during the deactivation of the HAL 9000 computer. While text-to-speech technology often evokes fear and apprehension, it also birthed one of the most recognizable voices in the world. Stephen Hawking's distinctive voice, synthesized by the ACAT system developed by Intel, transcends its technological origins. The groundbreaking technology enabled Hawking to communicate by selecting characters from an on-screen keyboard using the minute movements of his cheek muscles, underscoring the profound impact of assistive technology on human expression as well as connection.
People who boast about their IQ are losers.
Connor argues that the voice is often perceived as an extension of the body, representing a perfected or projected version of oneself. The voice carries with it an element of identity that goes beyond mere physical reproduction. It embodies personal presence and expression. In the Walten Files, the sound design plays with this idea by presenting voices and sounds that subvert their expected origins and meanings. The use of voice and sound becomes a critical tool in creating the uncanny effect, where the voice or sound does not align with the visual representation of its source. This disjunction plays into Connor's idea that the voice is not just a physical phenomenon, but a representation of identity. When the voice does not match the expected source or appears distorted, it evokes a sense of uncanny discomfort, as the voice seems to betray its mechanical origins and project a disturbing semblance of human presence. This boundary violation, coupled with the fear of the unknown, mirrors Freud's notion of the uncanny as a disruption of the familiar. The unsettling auditory experience amplifies the sense of existential threat and loss, the violation of boundaries through its sound design, with mechanical sounds intruding into what should be a familiar and comforting space. In the Walten Files, the distortion of characters' voices and faces is crucial in conveying a profound sense of disembodiment and identity disintegration. In one unsettling scene, a character's voice warps into a digital garble as the phrase, "I can't feel anything," flashes across the screen, accompanied by the visual of a bleeding, fragmented face. This severing of voice from body underscores the disintegration of identity, further emphasized by the phrase, "He thought I was her," delivered in a similar distorted tone, suggesting a confusion and erasure of personal boundaries. The disembodied, distorted voices become a stark representation of the mind's struggle to maintain coherence amid physical and psychological disintegration, with the harsh, unnatural tones of sound design reflecting a societal obsession with perfection and control. As the series critiques this unattainable ideal, the voice resists being fixed or made whole, mirroring the character's resistance to the violent transformation imposed upon them. The voices in the Walten Files thus occupy what can be described as a vocalic space, a concept referring to how the voice becomes a mediator between the physical body and its social or cultural context.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate, hate.
The vocalic space serves as a site of ambivalence, blurring the line between the internal experience of the self and the external, often hostile digital environment. This disjunction can be further understood through the lens of the Darwinian ranking system, which naturalizes cognitive hierarchies and legitimizes the marginalization of certain groups. The disembodied voices in the Walten Files could be seen as representing those deemed lower in social hierarchy, those who have been marginalized, dehumanized, and rendered voiceless in a literal and metaphorical sense. The mechanical distorted voices symbolize characters' enforced compliance with a system that seeks to fix or perfect them, even as it strips them of their humanity. Connor's words further illuminate this. The voice's continuing power to animate in the absence of a body which it should be animating and be animated by is distasteful and unnerving. The life that continues to reside in and emanate from the voice is hostile life. The concept of vocalic space, as defined by Connor, signifies how voice articulates different conceptions of space and enacts relationships between body, community, and time. The acousmetra, or the voice standing outside of diegesis, possesses qualities such as ubiquity, panopticism, omniscience, and omnipotence. In the Walten Files, disembodied voices often exhibit these characteristics, creating spaces where forbidden interactions and distorted realities are possible. Michel Foucault's concept of great confinement and his critique of the pathologization of madness provides a compelling lens through which to view the Walten Files. In the series, characters who undergo violent transformations into animatronics are confined not just physically, but also vocally. Their voices, once a reflection of their individuality, become distorted and controlled by the systems that seek to suppress their identities. This reflects Foucault's argument about how society historically attempts to control and silence those who deviate from the norm, framing them as threats to the social order. Foucault's relativistic perspective highlights that these processes of confinement and control are not fixed, but evolve over time and vary across cultures. This is particularly evident in the marginalization of certain behaviors and identities, a trend that gained prominence during the Enlightenment and Victoria eras in Europe. These historical frameworks illustrate how societal norms and mechanisms control and are constructed and how they shift in response to cultural and intellectual changes. In the Walten Files, this notion is mirrored by the transformation of characters into animatronics, which serve as a metaphor for the broader societal tendency to confine and dehumanize those who challenge established norms. Medical and scientific interventions can indeed offer significant benefits, such as extending life, restoring mobility, improving sight, and enhancing hearing, which might otherwise be unavailable. The medical model of disability, which frames disability as a personal deficit, contrasts sharply with the social model, which emphasizes systemic barriers, derogatory attitudes, and social exclusion that hinder disabled individuals from reaching their full potential. The social model advocates for addressing these barriers rather than focusing solely on individual deficits. This in turn categorized the body as working or broken, and in turn fixed by anyone with sufficient knowledge and resources, which then likened the healthy or sick body to a well-made or broken clock. In the Walten Files, the characters who are killed and transformed into animatronics are initially depicted as broken and in need of fixing. Their transformation is later framed as achieving a form of beauty, reflecting a societal obsession with perfection. This transformation, despite the violence and disablement involved, mirrors a broader societal fixation on unobtainable ideals. The digitalized and distorted voices of the animatronics symbolize this ideal, highlighting the paradox of perfection. It is both alluring and horrifyingly unattainable. This retroactive need to achieve a specific standard of perfection can result in appearances that feel unsettlingly unnatural or out of sync with human norms, reinforcing the idea that the pursuit of perfection can be both fascinating and disturbing.
Wow, look!
I'm a computer. I'm a computery guy. Everything made out of buttons and wires. I'd like to show you inside my digital life. Inside my mind there is a digital mind.
While Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared may not fully adhere to traditional conventions of analog horror, it shares many thematic and stylistic elements with the genre. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared takes the format of a typical children's show, a universally recognizable and comforting genre, and gradually distorts it into something deeply unsettling. The series' use of puppetry, stop motion, and retro aesthetics could be seen as an intentional nod to analog media, mimicking the style of the 1980s and 1990s children educational programs, which are often broadcast on analog televisions. This subversion of a benign format into something horrifying is a hallmark of analog horror, where familiar media becomes a source of fear. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, a British musical horror comedy web series by Becky Sloan and Joe Pelling, features the red guy, yellow guy, and duck. 3 puppets who receive seemingly innocent lessons on various topics, like jobs, death, and technology. However, each episode gradually becomes unsettling. In episode 4, the cheerful yet eerie Colin symbolises the pervasive influence of technology in our lives. He embodies the capitalist manufacturing of normal desires and false needs.
I just need to get some information from you. What's your name? Where do you live? What do you like to eat?
In his defence of propaganda, Bernays argued that governments and corporations could manipulate public desires through engineered consent, turning individual needs into commodities. As characters interact with Colin, they become increasingly alienated from their own thoughts and desires. Colin dictates what is normal, reinforcing a new form of alienation specific to the digital age. This aligns with Karl Marx's concept of alienation, where individuals are estranged from their identity as they conform to external standards. As well as this, how the labourer becomes alienated from the product of their own labour.
I am going to paint a picture of a clown. My dad has a computer. You are not invited to the party.
Wait, what?
This shift blurs the lines between work and personal life as technology renders workers perpetually reachable and their mental labour endlessly exploitable. Digital transactions and social media, much like themes in Black Mirror, reveal uncomfortable truths about our interactions and identities. The episode's depiction of Colin's control over the characters reflects the broader shift from traditional labour to cognitive capitalism, where knowledge and mental activity becomes the primary source of value. The shift blurs the line between work and personal life as technology renders workers perpetually reachable and their mental labour endlessly exploitable. The meta-narrative in these contexts, whether intentional or not, highlights a failure to acknowledge and confront these repressed truths, challenging normative assumptions and exposing the underlying issues within our societal structures. As the characters interact with Colin, they become increasingly alienated from their own thoughts and desires. Colin dictates what is normal, reinforcing a new form of alienation specific to the digital age that represents a fusion of human and mechanical elements, creating a character that is both familiar and profoundly alien. Colin's character, with his exaggerated and grotesque features, embodies the notion of the monstrous as a form of punishment or aberration. Colin's transformation when angry, marked by the red jagged lines and green fluid and white wire hands, evokes imagery of monstrous and demonic figures. His unsettling transformation and behaviour reflect broader societal anxieties about technology and its potential to dehumanize and disrupt. Colin's voice functions as both a tool and product, echoing the commodification of personal attributes in the labour market. Just as workers' personal and emotional qualities are harnessed to boost productivity and marketability, Colin's voice is used to manipulate and control the show's characters, representing the emotional labour required to navigate capitalist systems. This captures a new form of alienation, where every fragment of mental activity is subsumed by the production of value. As Berardi argues, the constant barrage of visual and auditory stimuli in our digital environment fosters a pervasive sense of alienation, where our cognitive space is overloaded with prompts to act, leaving little room for authentic self-reflection or creativity.
Yes, the real secret is not only a great source of energy, but also the freedom to make it work for everybody. And if you have both of these things, any goal is possible. It's Destination Unlimited.
Colin's behaviour is marked by arrogance, a brash personality. He frequently boasts about his intelligence, proudly declaring himself a smart boy, yet his eagerness to assist the trio often results in irrelevant or intrusive information rather than addressing their actual needs. His interruptions and disregard for the puppet's questions highlight the self-centered nature. Despite his claims of intelligence, Colin frequently makes grammatical errors, such as saying, "do a digital dancing," and "count to a 50 in the blink of my eye," which adds to his comedic yet irritating demeanour. His erratic, high-pitched screeches and constant interruptions contribute to a sense of manipulation and control, analogous to how capitalist systems manufacture desires and people are led to believe they need. Colin's sound design metaphorically represents how capitalist systems engineer consent and create artificial wants, echoing Edward Benet's concept of producing false needs. The forced normalization of Colin's lessons and the discomfort they produce critique how society often tries to correct neurodiverse individuals to fit a capitalist mold rather than embracing and valuing their differences. The idea of abusive occupation of cognitive spaces by visual and auditory stimuli is vividly illustrated by Colin's presence. His constant demands for attention, coupled with his barrage of digital information, reflect how modern capitalism invades every aspect of our lives, erasing the boundaries between work and home, public and private. Finally, the concept of techno-corrections and the moral imperative of normalization relate to Colin's role in enforcing a standard of normal behaviour. His authority over the characters echoes how modern technology is often used to control and normalize populations, making them more pliable and less resistant to capitalist exploitation. The episode critiques this by showing how such control strips individuals of their autonomy and uniqueness, reinforcing the need to resist these pressures and value neurodiversity and individual differences. Berardi notes, mental health deteriorates as our desiring energy is trapped in a trick of self-enterprise, a new form of alienation, animated, creative, linguistic, emotional corporeality is subsumed and incorporated by the production of value. Representation aligning with C. Wright Mill's concept of personality market, where even the most personal aspects of our lives become commodified in the labour market. Each new communication technology development brings political consequences, as seen in the complicated relationship between social media and the rise of far-right politics. The phenomenon of mass media standardization, where artistic creations are transformed into consumer goods, is matched by a largely manipulable consciousness that struggles to experience spontaneity. In the realm of music, Adorno argued that the commodification of music was fundamentally altered its nature. Where Bach once viewed his work as an artisan's craft, today music, although considered ethereal and sublime, functions as a commodity. This shift produces commodity listening, where music becomes a means rather than an end. The same pattern that Adorno observed in the radio music industry now permeates much of popular culture, reinforcing a cycle of standardization and commodification, whilst those who cannot conform are left as outsiders. Hughes writes, it is important to understand ableist disgust as an emotion that attests to the failure of non-disabled people to fully recognize their own vulnerabilities and imperfections, particularly as these relate to their own mortal selves and to death and decay that is the fate of all. Although it appears as an aversion to the other, it is a form of self-aversion, or a means by which we hide from the bodily basis of our own humanity. Our exploration of ableist listening and its implications in media representation and sound design uncovers the deep-seated biases that shape cultural perceptions of disability and divergence. Hughes' analysis of ableist disgust, rooted in societal aversion to vulnerability, morality, and human imperfection, emphasizes the need for critical self-reflection and social change. This aversion, often projected onto others, stems from a failure to recognize our own fragility. Horror media, through its strategic use of sound and music, often amplifies these biases. The distorted soundscape in Mad God underscores themes of dehumanization and existential dread. Similarly, the Walten Files and Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared uses distorted and eerie audio to challenge norms and highlight the fear of the unfamiliar. These examples illustrate how horror media not only entertains but also critiques cultural anxieties and prejudices. By analysing sound design in these works, we gain insight into ways ableist biases are embedded into media, reinforcing societal discomfort with divergent from the norm. The distortion of familiar sounds and voices highlights the series' engagement with themes of identity and dehumanization. As biodiversity is crucial to the survival of life, so too is diversity essential to the flourishing of humanity. To cultivate a truly inclusive society, we have to recognize divergence as an integral part of healthy neurological functioning and embrace the full spectrum of human experiences. By confronting our biases, we can move towards a society that values and supports all individuals, regardless of their neurological makeup or physical abilities. Thank you for watching and listening.